Hey there, it's Silver, and this is Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion. This is, of course, the sequel to Daemon X Machina, a fun but flawed mech customization game that had a lot of good things going for it beyond the somewhat janky downsides. In this case, we've switched from mechs down to Iron Man-style suits. Now, the gameplay is still very similar, but your mobility is different, and you control in a way that feels lighter. In this case, it uses some terms from the first game, but defines them a little differently. You play as an outer, a person modified by exposure to a mysterious energy called femto. You escape some dubious laboratory circumstances up in the Garden, a space station orbiting the planet. You then crash down on the planet and have to start over from there, helping people out and learning what schemes the Garden is up to. Humans don't tend to trust outers very much. Many are even actively antagonistic towards you. But you have your sick mech suit called an arsenal to keep you company and help you fight for the truth. The main antagonists this time are the Noin, a group of 9 outers from the Garden, equipped with super powerful arsenals and femto-based powers that make them vastly more powerful than anyone else. I think the story this time around is easier to follow than in the first game because there are fewer factions in play. And it also avoids the issue of characters constantly switching sides every 5 minutes and having like 12 secret allegiances. It's still a very anime-feeling story, yeah, but it's more grounded in sci-fi tropes with some fantasy elements that don't go entirely over the edge. You'll also be facing immortals as your enemies. In the first game, immortals were machines controlled by a corrupted AI. In this one, they're mutated biomechanical beasts that roam the surface freely. We've switched to an open world format this time around from the mission-based structure of the previous game, where you have large exploration areas interconnected by tunnels and caves that split them into different biomes. You have a linear story structure to follow that has some deviations when allowing you to face different bosses, and also plenty of missions to accept that have their own side stories and are basically this game's replacement for side quests. In terms of how the game looks and sounds, there's quite a lot going on. The most obvious thing to look at first, and also where the most detail was lavished, would be the arsenals. They look super cool and have a fantastic set of animations that look kinda heavy but also suitably agile given their small size. It's basically power armor at this stage and looks the part. There's a vast variety of parts you can install, and each set has its own unique style. The appearance of armor depends heavily on which set it is. So there are like light sets with thin and lithe looks that carry a fragile, speedy style. There are medium sets that look inspired by medieval armor, and others that have cloaks and cloth bits, and even some that are like far future sci-fi looking. Medium sets tend to have the most visual variety, I'd say. Then the heavy sets show up and look industrial and bulky. Some are reminiscent of heavy plate armor, while others appear more like sci-fi construction equipment. The weapons your arsenal uses are also well detailed and look cool. There's an enormous variety in weapons, so that translates to many different aesthetic styles to see. Often weapons unfold from a more compact form when in use and then fold back for storage, which always looks neat and has a surprising amount of animation detail dedicated to it. Particle effects and sounds from weapons firing are as satisfying as they need to be in my opinion, although the assault rifles and machine guns don't always sound as powerful as they could. Combat in general looks good and is importantly pretty readable most of the time, even when surrounded by enemies, but I think some boss attacks don't have as much of a telegraph animation as I would like compared to how devastating they are to get hit by. You can bet that a big monster with a huge beam attack usually charges it up to give you time to dodge, but occasionally it'll just fire that thing off in an instant, requiring you to have a couple Adderall on hand to pop for the fight. Enemy designs are pretty cool too. Considering they are mutants created by strange circumstances, the immortals have varied and interesting appearances. Some are like gross-looking four-legged beasts, sort of tiger made of spoiled pizza, but others look like strange flying creatures melded with robotics that seem to be begging for death at all times. The bigger immortals are impressive multi-segmented things with bizarre biology and a wealth of different attacks to learn. They can be inspired by dinosaurs, but with huge lasers in their chests, or even look like weird jellyfish with something from Dark Souls 3 hanging off the middle of them. I think they went crazy with the enemy designs this time around because it was a big weakness of the first game. The swarm enemies are particularly impressive to watch as they unload roughly 452 lasers directly into your eye sockets at once, and some enemies are simply so strange that you don't even know what they'll do at first. There are also plenty of robotic enemies, forces from the Garden, and other arsenals to fight, which have the same sci-fi but kinda Metal Gear or Ace Combat look. You know, that like near-future sci-fi mixed with more fantastical and far-flung elements here and there. Enemy machines are often kitted out with loads of weapons, and the detail is good enough that you can actually see them and preemptively prepare for a specific kind of threat. You'll be able to see things like beam shotguns and a big sword and know in advance that you probably don't want to get close to that one. This means combat is often very readable, even though there are large varieties of possible loadouts. Everything has a good enough identifiability, is that a word, to not get lost in the noise of explosions and laser fire. This readability is pretty impressive to me when fighting immortals, as they can look quite bizarre, yet their attacks and movements are easy to trace and don't tend to lose themselves in the dust of combat. Music is an interesting one here because it has a few different genres that kind of fuse together to create a soundtrack that sounds equal parts sleek and electronic, but also industrial and thrashy. I expected the music to get faster during combat, but I didn't expect a thrash beat interspersed with glitchy electronic sounds. The exploration music is pretty chill and relaxed, but in some areas it does have kind of a sinister Dead Planet sort of sound. The combat tracks are fast and have a sharp split between metal adjacent and electronic sections that tend to switch out between meters. I particularly like the bass and customization music. It's laid back and has a nice sort of background while focusing on fixing up your arsenal. Boss music is a standout and has more variety than most other tracks, often using a base of sci-fi glitchy sounds but with more traditional instruments on top, and sometimes dipping into more classical territory, especially when fighting the Noin. I think the overall presentation is solid, but the arsenals and bosses take the crown for most visually impressive and interesting. It helps that you have so much control over color and decal customization, combining with the various armor set appearances to mean there's a huge amount of personalization on offer for your sick mech suit. In my opinion, the main place where the game suffers aesthetically is in its open world. There are some cool looking areas like forests with crazy spiraling rock formations twisting around vines to make that biome look different than any other one, but often the world looks rather barren and uninteresting outside of certain standout places. I think the decaying wasteland with scattered ruins look can be fun, but I find that this game goes to that place maybe a little too often, and it can make the world feel even more dead than it's trying to be. The most obvious gameplay element to start with is something you'll be doing a lot, putting your arsenal together. It's got 5 slots for armor, head, chest, each arm, and the legs is one. The armor you pick determines things like physical and laser defenses, total VP, which is the health of the suit, weight and speed, and also how much memory you have to work with while equipping other things. There are tons of sets across 3 different weight classes, and they also have some enhanced versions of the sets which look the same but have superior stats. You could also do the Fashion Souls thing of equipping a set that you really like the look of course. You've also got quite a few weapon slots to work with. You got 1 slot for each hand and also 2 extra ones that allow you to carry extra hand equipment to switch out on the fly with the D-pad if you have the memory for it. Hand weapons include range stuff like assault rifles, machine guns, and SMGs, shotguns and beam shotties, longbows, laser rifles and charge lasers, and pistols, which have lower damage but ridiculous crit multipliers. There are also melee weapons like swords, two-handers, maces, and hammers, and laser swords. There are even shields and beam shields if you want more defense-oriented builds. The variety in equipment is definitely one of the game's best points and allows for a pretty huge amount of build variety. You've also got a shoulder slot that can equip things like cannons, homing missiles, laser cannons, railguns, and these new things called blitzes, which are like funnels from Gundam, kinda. You launch them out and they surround an enemy and fire little beams from all directions at them. They're pretty cool. Then there's the auxiliary slot, which contains things like grenades of all kinds, from explosive to jamming or incendiary, maybe extra mags for your hand weapons to increase their ammo total, or even extra boosters that allow you to move faster. Once you've got all those filled, there are also a bunch of consumable slots that you can populate with stuff. You can switch between these slots on the fly by holding down the D-pad, down on the D-pad actually, and using the right stick like a radial. This game does the Bloodborne thing of only letting you carry a smaller number of each consumable, but allowing any overflow to go into storage, where it will refill your slots with any extra at safe zones. Healing items, elemental mines, and stat boosts are found all over the place and can be a huge help in tougher fights, so it's a good idea to arrange these how you'd like for easy access. Once you have your arsenal constructed, you can also choose to decorate it with decals you've scanned from the environment and even make your own, as well as having plenty of control over every color on every section of the suit. I only wish you could also color the weapons. There's a really fun new mechanic in here called the fusion system that you can access after the first big story boss at the lab in your base. Enemies can sometimes drop factors, basically selections of genes that you can choose to loot instead of anything else they may have dropped. You can only hold a small number of these factors, but you can go to the lab and pay a small fee to integrate all held factors into your character. This will cause a mutation, a visual alteration to your character, from glowing eyes to swishy marks all over their body to floating stone shoulder plates. It tells you in advance what body part will be mutated, but not how exactly, so it's a good idea to save before doing this. You can also pay to undo the mutations, but it's hideously expensive, starting out at 130k when you just start with one mutation, and only getting pricier with every added mutation. And at that point in the game, you'll probably only have like 5k total. However, based on which factors you've absorbed, you will also unlock a variety of skills to equip that make yourself significantly stronger. There are active skills for each weapon type you can choose from individually, and that enable powerful new attacks when you're holding that weapon. Active skills you can slot into your character themselves, only one at a time, which have new effects like auto dodge mode that uses your energy to automatically dodge attacks for a bit. Now, there are also many passive skills that enhance your capabilities in various ways that have a cost system where you can equip as many as you want that you have the cost for. There is also an NPC at base that can upgrade your facilities. Enemies drop this purple resource called scrap. There are also nodes of scrap that can be smacked all over the place. You bring this scrap to this NPC and they can upgrade parts of your base with it. Upgrading the lab will allow you to hold more factors at a time and also increase the cost of passives you can equip total. You can also upgrade the shops to give them better equipment, to upgrade other capabilities to improve how they work in some way. These get pretty expensive, so they'll be like a set of long-term goals, basically, that you can work towards while you're out exploring. Also, while exploring, you'll come across various things to do. There are plenty of patrolling enemies to hunt, as well as some world bosses roaming around certain areas. These guys can be pretty nasty, but they are a fun fight and have cool designs. They also usually drop unique factors. There are also bases to clear out, areas guarded by plenty of enemies with defensive towers to break, and once you do, you can get in the base for lots of useful resources. Some bases are locked down inside, though, and require other methods, like story progression, to unlock them. You can find these destroyed beacons in some chests that can be repaired with materials, and then they show you an area where a treasure is hidden. It'll be staticky and hard to interpret their screens, but upgrades to your base can make them easier to pin down. You can also mine these deposits for loot and materials. Play a small minigame to deplete as much health as possible in 5 hits. The lower the HP, the better the reward. 0 HP requires all 5 hits to be perfect, although there are single-use items that make it easier in different ways that you can choose to use if you want. You'll also see that the game has a very robust fast travel system. All over the map, you'll find closed-off fast travel stations called byways. Simply finding and getting near many of them is enough to unlock them. Others are guarded by a group of enemies that you'll have to defeat first. You can climb into these and fast travel to any other one you've unlocked, as well as back to base, although you can also fast travel from anywhere on the map via the map menu. The world is a pretty good size, so fast travel is important, and you'll want to open up as many of these as possible for future missions. There are outposts called supply bases that you can build as well, small safe zones that take a consumable kit to activate. Simply poking one of these will replenish your femto, ammo, and consumables from storage, but you can also pay credits at these to restore missing VP and HP. VP is your suit's health, and HP is your outer's health. Once VP depletes, you'll start taking HP damage, and this will quickly kill you since you only start with 3. You actually have 1 less than you think, because as soon as your VP hits 0, it'll automatically deplete 1 HP, so you'll always be left with 1 less than the max to survive with. Stamina is used for things like dodging, dashing, and guarding, and recharges quickly. Femto is used to power several things, like your boosts, and recharges very slowly, although there are red femto crystals you can break just for some extra, and also these things called fem trees or femto trees that you can loiter near to recharge it in like a few seconds. You have several ways to move around. You can run at a good speed and also fly whenever you'd like, but flight takes a small trickle of femto to sustain it. You can also boost by clicking in the left stick. Boosting on the ground makes you break into a sprint that's quite fast and drains femto very slowly. Boosting in the air makes you fly forward at a very high speed and takes femto much more quickly. Early in the story, you'll get a bike that can be called at any one of those placeable outposts and is super fast to justify using it instead of simply flying. It can also transform into a battle mode that has a very powerful sort of beam cannon on it with a painfully slow cooldown. There are also some other vehicles you can commandeer as well, like trucks with usable turrets in the back. There are even mutant horses you can ride, the main advantage of those being that you can use your weapons while riding them. You may also eventually find some mechs that are more the size of the arsenals from the first game that you can climb into. As far as the game's open world goes, I like the size, the outposts and the bases, the world bosses and the other places to explore for sweet treasure chests, but I also can't help but feel that it's bigger than it needs to be. It's a quite empty feeling map, and even though there are still cool things to find and do, I think this content could have been served in a more compact map structure with far less dead space. It's fun to fly around in a cool mech suit and the travel controls are satisfying, but if you took the emptiness out and left only the notable content, the map would be like a third of its current size. The overall feel of the game is kind of like the Xenoblade games to me. It even has helpful enemy drop information on the map screen to help you blow up the correct enemies for the part or factory you're looking for. There's also a Coliseum that works exactly like the arenas from past Armored Core games, where you can fight increasingly difficult arsenals for increasingly better rewards. In the first game, your arsenal has these glowing red plates at their shoulders that you can use the D-pad to select a specific mode to make them enhance something. You had an offensive mode where they made your hand weapons hit harder, a defensive mode where they formed a shield to protect you for a bit, and a mobility mode that formed wings, which empowered your thrusters a bunch. This functionality has been rolled into chest armor. Some chest armor pieces, but not all, have one of these modes activatable by hitting the Y and B buttons together. The offensive one spawns weapons connected to you that fire on their own, and the defensive and mobility forms act very similar to the first game. There is a mission structure you can dive into back at base where you can accept various missions, and then you go out into the world and complete them, and then come back to the base and turn them in to get the reward. These are all technically side quests, but I'd recommend doing many of them, as they'll help you earn money, explore new areas, and unlock fast travel points, and increase your rank to help make you stronger and find better parts. The missions can be a variety of things, from protecting someone while they assault a bunch of sky cops like a doofus, raiding a base, hunting specific immortals, equipping a certain weapon, and fighting in front of this crazy photographer lady so she can get epic shots while you almost die 15 feet away, and even some missions where you simply deliver certain materials to help construct or repair something. The main quest line is actually pretty fun this time around, with a good variety of objectives and really good boss fights. There are fights with the Noin, the elite garden task force, that are a blast. Each member has their own gimmick, and you gotta defeat them all differently. They all have a cool variety of weapons and powers that make them quite challenging, such as Legion's ability to clone himself or Arachne's complete cloak. And you may need to build your arsenal differently to stand a chance against them. Always pay attention to the arenas in which you fight them. They aren't just big open spaces, they also have features to help you out. Legion's arena has jamming bombs that show which of his many selves is the real one. The sniper boss's arena has flash bombs in it to interrupt her sniping, and shipping containers to let you line of sight her shots. This time around, I think the main quest is a big highlight of the game, with fun characters and awesome bosses to punctuate the sort of mystery-solving exploits of your outer, trying to understand what's going on, both on the surface and in the garden above. You'll have various characters accompanying you as AI companions on certain missions, and you can also call characters up and have them travel the open world with you, kind of like how you could in the previous game. I shouldn't forget to mention the attachment system, by the way, as well, where weapons and armor can have slots in them for upgrades called attachments. You can socket in any of them you have to upgrade that part. And sometimes when you loot parts from enemies out in the field, they'll come with some pre-installed. One thing I really like is that when attaching new ones to a part, the list of attachments it shows isn't just your loose ones, but also includes all the ones installed in other parts you have in your inventory and lets you swap them around nice and easily. There's also a dungeon running system in place. You'll find mini dungeons in the form of caves and small facilities while out looking around. These often have several enemy encounters and rooms with resources and treasure, so they're worth doing. But there are also these key cards you can find, usually in bases and checkpoints. These can be taken to these elevator thingies and analyzed for a small fee. Then you can use the analyzed card to create a larger multi-floor dungeon you can run. You can even use blank key cards to copy other cards you have. These dungeons are descending bases with procedural room layouts, plenty of enemies to fight and loot, and lots of chests and things to find. At the end of every floor, you can choose to bail out with your loot currently, or go further for better stuff. And every dungeon has a number of floors it generates. I think if you die at any point during the run, you lose what you've collected thus far, hence the ability to peace out early if you're having trouble. When enemy arsenals go down, you can loot them for a small selection of what they're equipped with. You don't get a choice from everything, and you can only choose one thing before the body disappears. So looting is an important way to get more shiny stuff, and is often the main way that you get new gear. Immortals often explode when killed, but sometimes they'll leave a body that you can loot. They'll often have things like blueprints for new parts, as well as being how you get new factors for the lab. Loot in this game does a kind of interesting thing that's different from the previous entry. It has a variable stat system. When you look at a piece of gear, you'll see a letter next to every stat. That letter tells you how well that stat rolled. So a beam rifle with a C on laser damage will have significantly less power than that exact same rifle with an A on laser damage. This variance extends to blueprints as well, showing you in advance what qualities the produced item will have. I assume the system is to take advantage of the open world, thus giving you reasons to go out and loot the same equipment several times to try and get a really good roll on it. You can also choose to play the game in co-op if you wish, which is pretty cool. It seems like the kind of sandboxy fun, like playing something like Saints Row 2 with friends almost. Although at the time I'm writing this, there is currently a problem with the online segment of the game. For some reason, being online causes your load times to be massively unacceptably long. I knew something was up when I installed it on my Steam Deck, where it runs great, by the way, super fun experience on there, and also on my PC. My PC having a significantly faster SSD in it than the one on the deck, yet both machines were having basically identical load times of upwards of like 1.5 to 2 minutes sometimes, just sitting there. But when you switch to offline mode in the options menu, all of your load times magically disappear. So obviously that needs to be fixed. But if you plan to play solo, I recommend setting it to offline mode for now, so you don't have to go and like learn a new language every time the fast travel loading screen comes up to occupy yourself. Titanic Scion is a game of caveats and the possibility of a lot of fun if you can get past them. The open world is bigger and more barren than it needs to be by quite a bit. It's not a graphically impressive game by any means, although that never bothers me personally. The online functionality might be a bit wonky, and the game has this way of feeling like a remaster of something from the PlayStation 2 sometimes. I actually find that to be very charming. I like that feeling of this could have been a PS2 cult classic series in an alternate world, but I also know that not everyone is as fond of that feeling as I am. If you can get past the myriad flaws of the game, you'll find a really enjoyable mech customization experience with a fun, if silly, story and some really cool boss fights to challenge you. But it's also understandable that some of those flaws might break you out of the game entirely and prevent you from enjoying it. I very much enjoyed this one, and I'd recommend it to anyone who likes games like Armored Core or the first game in the series, of course. However, I also think that you might want to wait for a price decrease, unless you're especially taken when seeing it due to the price being unreasonably high in my view. You can find the Steam page below if you'd like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.